The stream. Three, two, one. And then we wait for YouTube to catch up because take its time. Oh wait, you're live. Oh my god. I'm the one lollygagging still. Still always, as always. As per usual. Hello, hello, hello. Alright. Make sure that Nightbot is awake. Wake up, please. Yeah, buddy, yeah, pal, yeah. Please, please be here. There you are. Welcome. Hi, Nightbot. Let's see. Join us on our Discord so that we can give us some recommendations on books, speak about Minecraft and anything else. Dum 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 dum. So I don't know if we need to redo the first part of Flatland. Honestly, I was getting a little sleepy towards the end. To be completely honest. So I can probably do a better version of it. I don't know if we're going to redo it. Luckily, it's just like the first half, you know. What is this, Japan? Are you live? Are you live at the same time as I? This should be a good thing. Definitely want you to follow at Japan Spits, like the dog on YouTube. Oh, 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 oh. That's still not a very good wolf, but oh, I gotta listen to more wolves. Hold on. There you go. Also, Valkyrie now live yapping. Check out Valkyrie. It's on YouTube. Oh wait, we're posting things. I can do it. How did we get here, chat? How the frick did we get here? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so freaking sorry. I'm watching Wolves Howl. I'm actively watching Wolves Howl. Oh my god. Alrighty then, that's done. Meow 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 chat. Let's freaking go. All right, so I just need to post the blue sky and the tweet, and then we are ready. Yes, yes. Call on me as bells begin to chime. Bum 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 ba dum ba da da dum dum. What the hell? Why aren't you letting me? Meow 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 meow. Come on. Right here, right now. Right here, right now. Bum 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 bum. Just want to make sure. All right, and there we go. Open it up. Perfect. Perfect. Perfection. All right, let's freaking go. Copy. Post. You wanna swear? Bum 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 here right now, right here, right now. Dee 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 dee. Bum 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 bum. All right. Need a at Satyen fan over here. Right here, right now, right here, right now, right here, right now. now. Hello, 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 and welcome back. We have part two of Flatland for you. Do we redo? No, we won't. We won't redo it until later on down the line. Yeah, that's true. Okay, good, good, good. Okay, we have some tea for you and for me. Nice and hot, freshly brewed tea. Meow, meow, meow. Wah. Share. It hurts so much. Right now, right here, right now. Okay, we did it. We did the damn thing. Oh. All right. We are ready to go, chat. What did Japan post? What the hell? All right, chat. Here we are. Oh, it's what you do to me. 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 What you do to me. All right, so I think we're ready to start. We got those things, we got those things, we got those things, and we are ready to go. Right here, right now, right here, right now. Part 2, Other Worlds. Oh, brave new worlds that have such people in them. Chapter 13, How I Had a Vision of Lineland. It was the last. So all of this first part was just us being introduced into the world of Flatland, their weird ways of being. They're so brutal to each other. That's just the way that they are. Oh my god, the ladies, they can like jam into anybody because it's so being a single point. They can easily go ahead and puncture one another. Isosceles triangles, who are the soldiers because they have their large points. The wait, no, it's the isosceles, yeah, the isosceles, and then the equilateral triangles, who have like more equal sides or equaler sides. Like eventually they become equilateral if they're like good enough, if they perform enough good works and deeds. And then from there they become equilateral. Then they become regular shapes and other such as triangles is a shape. Okay, so then they start adding sides to themselves. So isosceles being the bottom of the barrel with their small tiny little angles and their small tiny brain stems. um and in this society, we're not saying that we agree with this the way that but this is the way that it is according to the way it was written. The ladies have the least amount of brains because, like I said, they're just a line segment, a single point from certain angles. And so the isosceles have a least amount of brains of like the males, is what it was. And then yeah, once they become equilateral triangles, they're able to, through progress and the generations, add sides to themselves until they get enough sides where it's basically impossible to tell themselves from an actual circle, in which point they become part of the upper class, the upper caste, all those rich circles. This is such a weird world, such a weird way to be. You have to remember the modern world didn't always exist, and it doesn't always have to exist. There are other ways of being and other ways of doing things. And that's one of the beauties of reading, that you're able to consider like these things. You're able to think about ways of being that you would never have to come into encounter ever in your daily life. Um, well, the word I'm looking for. Thought experiments. Duh. More often than not, like these books are just thought experiments. Like being able to think about someone else's position, their condition, their social status, and maybe learning how to put yourselves into their own shoes. Like here we are, A Square. He's a mental patient here in this world because he's over here, and we're about to learn why they locked him up. I think we've gone over it just briefly, but yeah, he's over here trying to tell them about other dimensions. And they're like, show me where it is then. Show us how to achieve these other dimensions. And since he can't, he remains locked up like in the loony bin. So poor guy, he knows the truth, but he can't show it. He cannot. Why am I forgetting words? Cannot provide the example of how to like say show the height of their bodies. They can only see the brightness of it. How I had a vision of Lineland. So Lineland is a step down from Flatland. Flatland being a two-dimensional plane, Lineland just being a single line. It was the last day, but one of the 1999th year of our era, and the first day of the long vacation. Having amused myself till the late hour with my favorite recreation of geometry, I had retired to rest with an unsolved problem in my mind. In the night, I had a dream. My favorite recreation, geometry. This is so funny. I saw before me a vast multitude of small, straight lines, which I naturally assumed to be women, interspersed with other beings still smaller and of the nature of lustrous points, all moving to and fro in one and the same straight line, and as nearly as I could judge, with the same velocity. So we do have this picture. I can show you right here. I'm going to go ahead and lock it so that we can. My view of Lineland. So myself, the eye, he's over there at the top. It's right under my view of Lineland. The square right there is himself with his eye. But peering down, the women are those dots at the end. A boy, a smaller line segment. Men are the longer line segments, it looks like. The king, it looks like a thick segment over there. Men, boy, women. The king's eye is much larger than the reality, showing that his majesty could see nothing but a point. Okay. A noise of confused multitudinous chirping or twittering issued from them at intervals as long as they were moving, but sometimes they ceased from motion, and then all was silence. Approaching one of the largest of what I thought to be women, I accosted her, but received no answer. A second and third appeal on my part were equally ineffectual. Losing patience at what appeared to me intolerable rudeness, I brought my mouth into a position full in front of her mouth, so as to intercept her motion, and loudly repeated my question. Woman, what signifies this concourse, and this strange and confused chirping, and this monotonous motion to and fro in one and the same straight line? I am no woman, replied the small lion. I am the monarch of the world. But thou, whence intrudest thou into my realm of Limeland? Receiving this abrupt reply, I begged pardon if I had in any way startled or molested his royal highness, and describing myself as a stranger, I besought the king to give me the same account of his dominions. But I had the greatest possible difficulty in obtaining any information on points that really interested me. For the monarch could not refrain from constantly assuming that whatever was familiar to him must also be known to me, and that I was simulating ignorance in jest. However, by persevering questions, I elicited the following facts. It seemed that this poor ignorant monarch, as he called himself, was persuaded that the straight line which he called his kingdom, and in which he passed his existence, constituted the whole of the world, and indeed the whole of space. Not being able to either move or to see, save in his straight line, he had no conception of anything out of it. Though he had heard my voice when I first addressed him, the sounds had come to him in a manner so contrary to his experience that he had made no answer, seeing no man, as he expressed it, and hearing a voice, as it were, from my own intestines, until the moment when I placed my mouth in his world. He had neither seen me nor heard anything except confused sounds beating against what I called his side, but what he called his inside or stomach. Nor had he even known the least conception of the region from which I had come, outside his world, or line. All was blank to him. Nay, not even a blank, for a blank implies space, say rather all was non existent. His subjects, of whom small lines were men and the points women, were all alike confined in motion and eyesight to that single straight line which was their world. It need scarcely be added that the whole of their horizon was limited to a point, nor could anyone ever see anything but a point. Man, woman, child, thing, each was a point to the eye of the Linelander. Only by the sound of the voice could sex or age be distinguished. Moreover, as each individual occupied the whole of the narrow path, so to speak, which constituted the universe, and no one could move to the right or to the left or to make way for passers-by, it followed that no Linelander could ever pass another. Once neighbors, always neighbors. Neighborhood with them was like marriage with us. Neighbors remained neighbors till death did them part. Such a life with all that's funny. I was just stuck there, whap whap whap, bouncing, bumping into each other back and forth. Such a life, with all limited vision to a point and all motion to a straight line, seemed to me inexpressibly dreary, and I was surprised to note the vivacity and cheerfulness of the king, wondering whether it was possible, amid circumstances so unfavorable to domestic relations, to enjoy the pleasures of conjugal union. I hesitated for some time to question his royal highness on so delicate a subject, but at last I plunged into it by abruptly inquiring as to the health of his family. My wives and children, he replied, are well and happy. Staggered at this answer, for in the immediate proximity of the monarch, as I had noted in my dream before I entered Lineland, there were none but men, I ventured to reply, pardon me, but I cannot imagine how your royal highness can at any time either see or approach their majesties, when there are at least half a dozen intervening individuals whom you can neither see through nor pass by. Is it possible that in Lineland proximity it is not necessary for marriage and for the generation of children? How can you ask so absurd a question? Replied the monarch. If it were indeed as you suggest, the universe would soon be depopulated. No, no, neighborhood is needless for the union of hearts, and the birth of children is too important a matter to have been allowed to depend on such an accident as proximity. You cannot be ignorant of this, yet since you are pleased to affect ignorance, I will instruct you as if you were the veriest baby in Lineland. Know then that marriages are consummated by means of the faculty of sound and the sense of hearing. You are of course aware that every man has two mouths or voices, as well as two eyes, a bass at one and a tenor at the other of his extremities. I should not mention this, but that I have been unable to distinguish your tenor in the course of our conversation. I replied that I had but one voice, and that I had not been aware that his royal highness had two. That confirms my impression, said the king, that you are not a man, but a feminine monstrosity with a bass voice and an utterly uneducated ear. But to continue, nature having herself ordained that every man should wed two wives. Why two? I asked. You carry your affected simplicity too far, he cried. How can there be a completely harmonious union without the combination of the four in one, viz., the bass and the tenor of the man, and the soprano and contralto of the two women? But supposing, I said, that a man should prefer one wife or three, it is impossible, he said. It is inconceivable as that two and one should make five, or that the human eye should see a straight line. I would have interrupted him, but he proceeded as follows. Once in the middle of each week, a law of nature compels us to move to and fro with a rhythmic motion of more than usual violence. which continues for the time you would take to count 101. In the midst of this choral dance, the 51st pulsation, the inhabitants of the universe pause in full career, and each individual sends forth his richest, fullest, sweetest strain. It is in this decisive moment that all our marriages are made. So exquisite is the adaptation of bass to treble, or tenor to contralto, that oftentimes the loved ones, though 20,000 leagues away, recognize at once the responsive note of their destined lover. And penetrating the paltry obstacles of distance, love unites the three. The marriage in that instant consummated results in threefold male and female offspring, which takes its place in Lineland. What? Always threefold, said I. Must one wife then always have twins? Bass voiced monstrosity. Yes, replied the king. How else could the balance of the sexes be maintained? If two girls were not born for every boy, would you ignore the very alphabet of nature? He ceased, speechless for fury, and some time elapsed before I induced him to resume his narrative. You will not, of course, suppose that every bachelor among us finds his mates at the first wooing in this universal marriage chorus. On the contrary, the process is by most of us many times repeated. Few are the hearts whose happy lot it is at once to recognize in each other's voices their partner intended for them by Providence, and to fly into reciprocal and perfectly harmonious embrace. With most of our courtship is of while with most of us the courtship is of long duration. The wooer's voices and perhaps accord with one of the future wives, but not with both, or not at first with either, or the soprano and contralto may not harmonize. In such cases, nature has provided that every weekly chorus shall bring the three lovers into closer harmony. Each trial of voice, each fresh discovery of discord, almost imperceptibly induces the least perfect to modify his or her vocal utterance so as to approximate to the more perfect. And after many trials and many approximations, the result is at last achieved. There comes a day at last when, while the wanted marriage chorus goes forth from universal lineland, the three far off lovers suddenly find themselves in exact harmony, and before they awake, the wedded triplet is wrapped vocally into a duplicate embrace, and nature rejoices over one more marriage and over three more births. So interesting. So, just by the nature of their very land that they live in, there is entirely different way of reproducing, singing. So cool, so cool. I'll be right back. I'll be 2 seconds, I promise. here. I'm here. Sorry, chat. I wash my hands. I promise. I promise. I wash my hands. We always do. We always wash our freaking hands. All right, you're welcome. You're welcome, chat. I miss you more than and then three births. So one boy and then two girls are born every time. Chapter 14. How I vainly tried to explain the nature of Flatland. Thinking that it was time to bring down the monarch from his raptures to the level of common sense, I determined to endeavor to open him up to him some glimpses of the truth. That is to say, of the matter of the nature of things in Flatland. So I began thus. How does your royal highness distinguish the shapes and positions of his subjects? I, for my part, noticed that by the sense of sight before I entered your kingdom that some of your people are lines and other points, and that some of the lines are larger. You speak of an impossibility, interrupted the king. You must have seen a vision, for to detect the difference between a line and a point by the sense of sight is, as everyone knows, in the nature of things, impossible. But it can be detected by the sense of hearing, and by the same means my shape can be exactly ascertained. Behold me, I am a line, the longest in Lineland, over 6 inches of space. Of length, I ventured to suggest. Fool, said he, space is length. Interrupt me again, and I have done. I apologized, but he continued scornfully. Since you are impervious to arguments, you shall hear with your ears how, by means of my two voices, I reveal my shape to my wives, who are at this moment 6,000 miles, 70 yards, 2 feet, 8 inches away, the one to the north and the other to the south. Listen, I call to them. He chirped and then complacently continued. My wives at this moment receiving the sound. My wives at this moment receiving the sounds of one of my voices closely followed by the other, and perceiving that the latter reaches them after an interval in which the sound can traverse 6.457 inches, infer that one of my mouth is 6.457 inches further from them than the other, and accordingly, you know my shape to be 6.457 inches, but you will, of course, understand that my wives do not make this calculation every time they hear my two voices. They made it once for all before we were married, but they could make it at any time, and in the same way, I can estimate the shape of any of my male subjects by the sense of sound. But how, said I, if a man feigns a woman's voice with one of his two voices, or so disguises his southern voice so that it cannot be recognized as the echo of the northern? May not such deceptions cause great inconvenience? And have you no means of checking frauds of this kind by commanding your neighboring subjects to feel one another? This, of course, was a very stupid question, for feeling could not have answered the purpose. But I asked with the view of irritating the monarch, and I succeeded perfectly. What? He cried in horror. Explain your meaning. Feel, touch, come into contact, I replied. If you mean by feeling, said the king, approaching so close as to leave no space between two individuals, know, stranger, that this offense is punishable in my dominions by death. And the reason is obvious. The frail form of a woman, being liable to be shattered by such an approximation, must be preserved by the state. But since women cannot be distinguished by sense of sight from the men, the law ordains universally that neither man nor woman shall be approached so closely as to destroy the interval between the approximator and the approximated. And indeed, what possible purpose would be served by this illegal and unnatural excess of approximation, which you call touching, when all ends of so brutal and coarse a process are attained at once more easily and more exactly by the sense of hearing? As to your suggested danger of deception, it is non-existent. For the voice, being the essence of one's being, cannot be thus changed at will. But come, suppose that I had the power of passing through solid things, so that I could penetrate my subjects one after another, even to the number of 1,000,000,000, verifying the size and distance of each by the sense of feeling. How much time and energy would be wasted in this clumsy and inaccurate method? Whereas now, in one moment of audition, I take, as it were, the census and statistic, local, corporal, mental, and spiritual of every living being in Lineland. Hark, only hark. So yeah, even the suggestion of like moving around and touching other people is like, man, that would take forever. When we can just do it our way with the songs, the beauty of music, which is really cool. And Tolkien's universe, everything was created with song. It all started with song. At the beginning, Iluvatar and Anur were over there just singing everything into existence, and then Melkor came and added his dissonance, and then like it was in the world forever. There was no going back after that. Which is all really cool. The way that the different melodies lined up with the different events. It seemed like, that occurred in Middle Earth. And then ultimately, the phase of Middle Earth was that eventually it became our world, because so there was like lands further off to the different ways, but they got closed off to the different people because the elves were bad to they what did they do? They fought each other. I think it was that they fought each other, right? And so the Cimmerillions were scattered, the light of the trees, and yeah, so the Nur closed off the ways to the west and made the Earth a sphere, and then eventually all the race of men took over. The elves traveled to the west, and then it became the modern world. That's the history of Middle Earth. I was reading that there was a book that he was going to write, planning to write, after like the War of the Rings, the Fourth Age, but it would have been like a thriller, like a spy thriller sort of novel, and he didn't see any need in having to write it, so he didn't. So we got what we got. So saying, he paused and listened, as if in ecstasy, to a sound which seemed to be no better than a tiny chirping from an innumerable multitude of Lilliputian grasshoppers. Truly, replied I, your sense of hearing serves you in good stead and fills up many of your deficiencies. But permit me to point out that your life in Lifeland must be deplorably dull. To see nothing but a point, not even to be able to contemplate a straight line, nay, not even to know what a straight line is, to see yet be cut off from those linear prospects which are vouchsafed to us in Flatland. Better surely to have no sense of sight at all than to see so little. I grant you I have not your discriminative faculty of hearing, for the concert of all Lineland which gives you such intense pleasure is to me no better than a multitudinous twittering or chirping. But at least I can discern by sight a line from a point, and let me prove it. Just before I came into your kingdom, I saw you dancing from left to right, and then from right to left, with 7 men and women in your immediate proximity on the left, and 8 men and 2 women on your right. Is not this correct? It is correct, said the king, so far as the numbers and sexes are concerned, though I know not what you mean by right and left. But I deny that you saw these things, for how could you see the line, that is to say, the inside of any man? But you must have heard these things, and then dreamed that you saw them, as if in a dream. And let me ask what you mean by those words left and right. I suppose it is your way of saying northward and southward. Not so, replied I. Besides your motion of northward and southward, there is another motion which I call from right to left. King, exhibit to me, if you please, this motion from left to right. I, nay, that I cannot do, unless you could step out of your line altogether. King, out of my line? Do you mean out of the world, out of space? I, well, yes, out of your world, out of your space, for your space is not the true space. True space is a plane, but your space is only a line. King, if you cannot indicate this motion from left to right by yourself moving in it, then I beg you describe it to me in words. I, if I cannot tell you if you cannot tell your right side from your left, I fear that no words of mine can make my meaning clear to you. But surely you cannot be ignorant of so simple a distinction. King, I do not in the least understand you. I, alas, how should I make it clear? When you move straight on, does it not sometimes occur to you that you could move in some other way, turning your eye around so as to look in the direction towards which your side is now fronting? In other words, instead of always moving in the direction of your one extremities, do you never feel a desire to move in the direction, so to speak, of your side? King, never. And what do you mean? How can a man's inside front in any direction? Or how can a man move in the direction of his inside? I, Well, then, since words cannot explain the matter, I will try deeds, and I will move gradually out of Lineland in the direction which I desire to indicate to you. And the word I began at the word I began to move my body out of Lineland. As long as any part of me remained in the dominion, and in his view, the king kept exclaiming, I see you still. You are not moving. But when I had at last But when I had at last moved myself out of his line, he cried in the shrillest voice, She is vanished! She is dead! I am not dead, replied I. I am simply out of Lineland. That is to say, out of the straight line which you call space, and in the true space which I can see things as they are. And at this moment I see your line, or side, or inside, as you are pleased to call it. And I can see also the men and women on the north and south of you, whom I will now enumerate, describing their order, their size, and the interval between each. When I had done this at great length, I cried triumphantly, Does that at last convince you? And with that, I once more entered Lineland, taking up the same position I had before. So as you can see, there's Lineland. The king is over here all the way to the right. And so as he's entering Lineland, he appears to be a point to the king. That's why the king sees him as a female, right? And then when he exits the line, he's gone. He's vanished completely, but you can still hear his voice coming from the insides of the king, or the insides as he calls him, right? Because that would be the insides, right? The middle section right there, his insides. But the monarch replied, If you were a man of sense, though as you appear to only have one voice, I have little doubt you are not a man, but a woman. But if you had a particle of sense, you would listen to reason. You ask me to believe that there is another line besides that which my senses indicate, and another motion besides that of which I am daily conscious. I, in return, ask you to describe in words or indicate by motion the other line of which you speak. Instead of moving, you merely exercise some magic art of vanishing and returning to sight. And instead of any lucid description of your new world, you simply tell me that numbers and sizes of some 40 of my retinue, facts known to any child in my capital. Can anything be more irrational or audacious? Acknowledge your folly or depart from my dominions. So he's saying, I guess this is just a lot of incredible bullshit that you're trying to spin my way. Furious at his perversity, I especially and especially indignant that he professed to be ignorant of my sex, I resorted in no measured terms. Besotted being, you think yourself the perfection of existence, while you are in reality the most imperfect and imbecile. You profess to see, whereas you can see nothing but a point. You plume yourself on inferring the existence of a straight line, but I can see straight lines and infer the existence of angles, triangles, squares, pentagon, hexagons, and even circles. Why waste more words? Suffice it that I am the completion of your incomplete self. You are a line, but I am a line of lines, called in my country a square, and even I, infinitely superior though I am to you, am of little account among the great nobles of Flatland, whence I have come to visit you, in hope of enlightening your ignorance. Hearing these words, the king advanced towards me with a menacing cry, as if to pierce me through the diagonal. And in that same moment, there arose from myriads of his subjects a multitudinous war cry, increasing in vehemence, till at last, methought it rivaled the roar of an army of 100,000 isosceles, and the artillery of 1,000 pentagons. Spellbound and motionless, I could neither speak nor move to avert the impending destruction. And still the noise grew louder, and the king came closer, when I awoke to find the breakfast bell recalling me to the realities of Flatland. So he pissed them all the frick off. He really pissed them all off. But see, his truths are just things that they were unable to just grasp, like in any meaningful sense, you know? Like, what do you mean move this way and that way? You know, they can only go this way and that way. What do you mean go this way and that way? You're wild. You're crazy. You must be insane. Insane in the member. Insane. Got no brain. Beep, beep, beep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 15, chapter 15, concerning a stranger from Spaceland. And so that was his little interaction with Lineland. And then here comes his big revelation. From dreams, I proceed to facts. It was the last day of the 1999th year of our era. The the pattering of rain had long ago announced nightfall, and I was sitting in the company of my wife, musing on the events of the past and prospects of the coming year, the coming century, the coming millennium, When I say sitting, of course, I do not mean any change of attitude, such as when you in Spaceland signify by that word. For as we have no feet, we can no more sit nor stand, in your sense of the word, than one of your souls or flounders. Nevertheless, we perfectly well recognize the different mental states of volition implied in lying, sitting, and standing, which are to some extent indicated to a beholder by a slight increase of luster corresponding to the increase of volition. But on this and a thousand other kindred subjects, time forbids me to dwell. My four sons and two orphan grandchildren had retired to their several apartments, and my wife alone remained with me to see the old millennium out and the new one in. I was wrapped in thought, pondering in my mind some words that I had casually issued from the mouth of my youngest grandson, a most promising young hexagon of unusual brilliancy and perfect angularity. His uncles and I had been giving him all his usual practical lessons in sight recognition, turning ourselves upon our centers, now rapidly, now more slowly, and questioning him as to our positions and his answers, and his answers had been so satisfactory that I had been induced to reward him by giving him a few hints on arithmetic as applied to geometry. So they need him to already be learning the sight recognition since he's on his way to becoming a more perfect circle. Taking 9 squares, each an inch every way, I had put them together so as to make one large square with a side of 3 inches, and I had hence proved to my little grandson that though it was impossible for us to see the inside of the square, yet we might ascertain the number of square inches in a square by simply squaring the number of inches in the side, and thus, said I, we know that 3 squared, or 9, represents the number of square inches in a square whose side is 3 inches long. The little hexagon meditated on this for a while and said to me, "But you have been teaching me to raise numbers to the third power. I suppose 3 to the third, 3 must mean something in geometry. What does it mean?" "Nothing at all," replied I. "Not at least in geometry. For geometry has only 2 dimensions." So interesting, so interesting. But he's like, but what about if we add another dimension to that? Because they're going, so Lineland is whack just one, and so Flatland is whack whack. You got two dimensions there, and then if he says, "But what about the third dimension? What about?" And so A Square himself says that doesn't mean anything. It means nothing at all, or not in the least in geometry. For in geometry only has 2 dimensions. And then I began to shew the boy how a point by moving through a length of 3 inches makes a line of 3 inches, which may be represented by 3, and how a line of 3 inches moving parallel to itself through the length of 3 inches makes a square of 3 inches every way, which may be represented by 3 squared. Upon this, my grandson, again returning to his former suggestion, took me up rather suddenly and exclaimed, "Well, then, if a point by moving 3 inches makes a line of 3 inches represented by 3, and if a straight line of 3 inches moving parallel to itself makes a square of 3 inches everywhere represented by 3 squared, it must be that a square of 3 inches every way, moving somehow parallel to itself, but I don't see how, must make something else, but I don't see what, of 3 inches every way, and this must be represented by 3 to the third." "Go to bed," I said, a little ruffled by this interruption. "If you would talk less nonsense, you would remember more sense." So interesting. He says you're talking a whole bunch of garbage. It's so funny. Yeah. So my grandson had disappeared in disgrace, and there I sat by my wife's side, endeavoring to form a retrospect of the year 1999 and of the possibilities of the year 2000, but not quite able to shake off the thoughts suggested by the paddle of my bright little hexagon. Only a few sands now remained in the half-hour glass. Rousing myself from reverie, I turned the glass northward for the last time in the old millennium, and in the act I exclaimed aloud, "The boy is a fool." Straightway I became conscious of a presence in the room, and a chilling breath thrilled through my very being. "He is no such thing," cried my wife, "and you are breaking the commandments and thus dishonoring your own grandchildren." But I took no notice of her because remember, it's part of their customs to the next generation has to receive has to receive all like the praise and given the gifts that they need to accomplish even greater things, and feats, and get another perfectly angled side added to them so that it can get, inch closer and closer to becoming a more perfect circle, or circular as it were, because I mean there's these polygons, like if they are just really really many sided, then they technically, I mean, while they appear to be circular to the untrained eye, like if you're able to measure them, then you will know that no, they aren't. But then exactly what is a circle? And like there are pure non bred up circles in this world. Like what are they? Where did they come from? So interesting. All the implications. all the things that we'll never even like we'll never get the answers to, because this is just the story about this A Square and his travels to Spaceland. And so yeah, these things, they're not important. They're not important to us at all, although they are well worth a think. My wife as well as myself heard but I took no notice of her. Looking round in every direction, I could see nothing, yet I still felt a presence and shivered as a cold whisper came again. I started up. "What is the matter?" said my wife. "There is no drought. What are you looking for?" "There is nothing." There was nothing, and I resumed my seat again, exclaiming, "The boy is a fool, I say. 3 to the third can have no meaning in geometry." At once there came a distinctly audible reply. "The boy is not a fool, and 3 to the third has an obvious geometrical meaning." My wife, as well as myself, heard the words, although she did not understand their meaning, and both of us sprang forward in the direction of the sound. What was our horror when we saw before us a figure! At the first glance, it appeared to be a woman, seen sideways, but a moment's observation showed me that the extremities passed into dimness too rapidly to represent one of the female sex, and I should have thought it a circle, only that it seemed to change its size in a manner impossible for a circle or any regular figure of which I had experience. But my wife had not my coolness necessary to note these characteristics. With the usual hastiness and unreasoning jealousy of her sex, she flew at once to the conclusion that a woman had entered the house through some small aperture. "How comes this person here?" she exclaimed. "You promised me, my dear, that there should be no ventilators in our new house." "Nor are there any," said I. "But what makes you think that the stranger is a woman? I see by my power of sight recognition." "Oh, I have no patience with your sight recognition," replied she. "Feeling is believing, and a straight line is to the touch, and a straight line to the touch is worth a circle to the sight. Two proverbs very common with the frailer sex in Flatland." "Well," said I, for I was afraid of irritating her, "if I must be so, demand an introduction." Assuming her most gracious manner, my wife advanced towards the stranger. "Permit me, madam, to feel and be felt by," and then suddenly recoiling, "Oh, it is not a woman, and there are no angles either, not a trace of one. Can it be that I have so misbehaved to a perfect circle?" "I am indeed, in a certain sense, a circle," replied the voice, "and a more perfect circle than any in Flatland. But to speak more accurately, I am many circles in one." Then he added more mildly, "I have a message, dear madam, to your husband, which I must not deliver in your presence, and if you would suffer us to retire for a few minutes." But my wife would not listen to the proposal that our august visitor so incommode himself, and assuring the circle that the hour of her own retirement had long passed, with many reiterated apologies for her recent indiscretion, she at last retreated to her apartment. I glanced at the half-hour glass. The last sands had fallen. The third millennium had begun. Chapter 16: How the Stranger Vainly Endeavored to Reveal to Me the Words and Mysteries of Spaceland. So, in the first part, we encountered Lineland and the king, who just was unable to, reason to the idea that there might be other dimensions, other planes, and like that. And now here we are with A Square and a mysterious perfect circle, a more perfect circle, a sphere, probably as it were, has come to Flatland to try to do the same thing and explain to A Square that there are other ways of moving, right? Dimensions are about movement. So he's going in and out of Flatland. So see, as like he comes in, he's a point, and then he becomes a line, and you see like a circle. You see more parts of him. He's entering the plane, and then when he exits the plane, he goes back into a point and disappears entirely. And then they hear his voice from their insides, right? Because he needs to direct the sound waves like in a direction. So he directs it towards their body itself, right? Instead of like an ear receiver or some sort of like reception radar dish panel. Mm-mm-mm. So yes, now we will see that why it was so hard for the king himself to even try to understand other dimensions, and probably the only way that the king would be able to understand the area of Flatland would be to be sent out of Lineland and see the larger area. As soon as the sound of the peace cry of my departing wife had died away, I began to approach the stranger with the intention of taking a nearer view and bidding him be seated. But his appearance struck me dumb and motionless with astonishment. Without the slightest symptoms of angularity, he nevertheless varied every instant with gradations of size and brightness scarcely possible for any figure within the scope of my experience. The thought flashed across me that I might have become have before me a burglar or cutthroat, some monstrous irregular isosceles, who, by feigning the voice of a circle, had obtained admission somehow into the house, and was now preparing to stab me with his acute angle. In a sitting room, the absence of fog and season happened to be remarkably dry, made it difficult for me to trust to sight recognition, especially at a short distance which I was standing. Desperate with fear, I rushed forward with an unceremonious, "You must permit me, sir," and felt him. My wife was right. There was not a trace of an angle, nor the slightest roughness or inequality. Never in my life had I met with a more perfect circle. An actual perfect circle, like I was saying, like not these many sided polygons, an actual round circle. He remained motionless while I walked round him, beginning from his eye and returning to it again. Circular he was throughout, a perfectly satisfactory circle. There could not be a doubt of it. Then followed a dialogue which I will endeavor to set down as near as I can recollect it, omitting only some of my profuse apologies, for I was covered with shame and humiliation that I, a square, should have been guilty of the impertinence of filling a circle. I was commenced by the stranger with some impertinence at the lengthiness of my introductory process. Stranger. Have you felt me enough by this time? Are you not introduced to me yet? I, most illustrious sir, excuse my awkwardness, which arises from not from ignorance of the usages of polite society, but from a little surprise and nervousness consequent on the somewhat unexpected visit. And I beseech you to reveal my indiscretion to no one, and especially not to my wife. But before your lordship enters into further communications, would he deign to satisfy the curiosity of one who would gladly know whence this visitor came? Stranger. From space, sir. Whence else? I. Pardon me, my lord, but is not your lordship already in space? Your lordship and his humble servants, even at this moment? Stranger. Pooh, what do you know of space? Define space. I. Space, my lord, is height and breadth indefinitely prolonged. Stranger. Exactly. You see, you do not even know what space is. You think it is of two dimensions only, but I have come to announce to you a third: height, breadth, and length. Your lordship is pleased to be. So height would be the one that they don't know. Yeah. I know length. Height and breadth is what they do know. Your lordship is pleased to be merry. We also speak of length and height, or breadth and thickness, thus denoting two dimensions by four names. Stranger, but I mean not only three names, but three dimensions. I would your lordship indicate to explain to me what direction is the third dimension? Unknown to me. Stranger, I came from it. It is up above and down below. I, my lord means seemingly that is northward and southward? Stranger, I mean nothing of the kind. I mean a direction in which you cannot look because you have no eye in your side. I, pardon me, my lord, a moment's inspection will convince your lordship that I have perfect luminary at the juncture of two of my sides. Stranger, yes, but in order to see space, you ought to have an eye not on your perimeter, but on your side. That is, on what you would probably call your inside, but what we in Spaceland should call it your side. So, like I said, if you look over here at this picture right here, with this square, it is his side. I mean, his insides, because we are not able to view the inside of a square if we're in Flatland. But since the stranger is able to see up above and then down below, that would be his side. And in order for the square to be able to see either of these directions, he would need one eyeball, like right here, not at one of the little junctures, his little vertices, but like on the actual side itself. I in my inside, and I in my stomach, your lordship jests. The stranger, I am in no jesting humor. I tell you that I come from space, or since you will not understand what space means, from the land of three dimensions, whence I but lately looked down upon your plane, which you call space, forsooth. From that position of advantage, I discerned all that you speak of as solid, by which you mean enclosed on your four sides. Your houses, your churches, your very chests and safes, yes, even your insides and stomachs, all lying open and exposed to my view. Such assertions are easily made, my lord. Stranger, but not easily proved, you mean? But I mean to prove mine. When I descended here, I saw your four sons, the pentagons, each in his apartment, and your two grandsons, the hexagons. I saw your youngest hexagon remain a while with you, and then retire to his room, leaving you and your wife alone. I saw your isosceles servants, three in number, in the kitchen at supper, and the little page in the scullery. Then I came here, and how do you think I came? Through the roof, I suppose. Stranger, not so. Your roof, as you know very well, has been recently repaired and has no aperture by which even a woman could penetrate. I tell you, I came from space. Are you not convinced by what I have told you of your children and your household? I, Your lordship must be aware that such facts touching the belongings of his humble servant might be easily ascertained by anyone in the neighborhood possessing your lordship's ample means of obtaining information. Stranger says to himself, what must I do? Stay. One more argument suggests itself to me. When you see a straight line, your wife, for example, how many dimensions do you attribute to her? Your lordship would treat me as if I were one of the vulgar who, being ignorant of mathematics, suppose that a woman is really a straight line and only of one dimension. No, no, my lord, we squares are better advised and are as well aware as your lordship that a woman, though popularly called a straight line, is really and scientifically a very thin parallelogram, possessing two dimensions like the rest of us, viz., length and breadth, or thickness. Stranger, but the very fact that a line is visible implies that it possesses yet another dimension. I, my lord, I have just acknowledged that a woman is broad as well as long. We see her length, we infer her breadth, which, though very slight, is incapable of measurement. Stranger, you do not understand me. I mean that when you see a woman, you ought to, besides inferring her breadth, to see her length and to see what we call her height. Although that last dimension is infinitesimal in your country. If a line were a mere length without height, it would cease to occupy space and would become invisible. Surely you must recognize this. I must indeed confess that I do not in the least understand your lordship. When we in Flatland see a line, we see length and brightness. If the brightness disappears, then the line is extinguished, and as you say, ceases to occupy space. But am I to suppose that your lordship gives brightness the title of a dimension, and that what we call bright, you call high? Stranger. No, indeed. By height, I mean a dimension like your length. Only with you, height is not so easily perceptible, being extremely small. My lord, your assertion is easily put to the test. You say that I have a third dimension, which you call height. Now, dimension implies direction and measurement, but do but measure my height, or merely indicate to me the direction in which my height extends, and I will become your convert. Otherwise, your lordship's own understanding must hold me excused. So he's arguing the same things that they came in, they questioned him about in the beginning, remember? Like, here, show me exactly which direction you're talking about. And he's like, but I can't. Stranger to himself, I can do neither. How shall I convince him? Surely a plain statement of facts followed by ocular demonstration ought to suffice. Now, sir, listen to me. You are living on a plane. What you style flatland is the vast level surface of what I may call a fluid, or on or in the top of which you and your countrymen move about without rising above it or falling below it. I am not a plane figure, but a solid. You call me a circle, but in reality, I am not a circle, but an infinite number of circles of size varying from a point to a circle of 13 inches in diameter, one placed on top of the other. When I cut through your plane, as I am doing now, I make in your plane a section which you very rightly call a circle. For even a sphere, which is my proper name in my own country, if he manifests himself to an inhabitant of Flatland, must needs manifest himself as a circle, because he's dipping into the world. So you're only getting that one cross section, like they were talking about, MRI scans, things like that. You're only getting one slice of him at a time while you're here in Flatland, which is the next one. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I didn't have a napkin here. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Do you remember, for I, who see all things, discerned last night the phantasmal vision of Lineland written upon your brain? Do you not remember, I say, how when you entered the realm of Lineland, you were he saw inside his brain. So funny, so wild, crazy. He can see all his digestion going on and everything like that. Oh my god, disgusting. Do you not remember, for I, who see all things, discerned last night the phantasmal vision of Lineland written upon your brain? Do you not remember, I say, how when you entered the realm of Lineland, you were compelled to manifest yourself to the king, not as a square, but as a line, because the linear realm had not dimensions enough to represent the whole of you, but only a slice or section of you. In precisely the same way, your country of two dimensions is not spacious enough to represent me, a being of three, but can only exhibit a slice or section of me, which is what you call a circle. The diminished brightness of your eye indicates incredulity, but now prepare to receive a proof positive of the truth of my assertions. You cannot indeed see more than one of my sections or circles at a time, for you have no power to raise your eye out of the plane of Flatland. But you can at least see that as I rise in space, so my sections become smaller. See now, I will rise, and the effect upon your eye will be that my circle will become smaller and smaller till it dwindles to a point and finally vanishes. Just like when a square was over there in Lineland. The sphere with his sections at full. That's the first one. The sphere is rising. That's the second one. And then the sphere on the point of vanishing from his eye. So he's a big circle, he's a smaller circle, and then he eventually turns down into a point. At which point, if he chooses to leave Flatland, he will vanish completely. There was no rising that I could see, but he diminished and finally vanished. I winked once or twice to make sure that I was not dreaming, but it was no dream. For the depths of nowhere came forth a hollow voice, close to my heart, and it seemed, "Am I quite gone? Are you convinced now? Well, now I will gradually return to Flatland, and you shall see my section become larger and larger." Every reader in Spaceland will easily understand that my mysterious guest was speaking the language of truth and even of simplicity. But to me, proficient though I was in Flatland mathematics, it was by no means a simple matter. The rough diagram given above will make clear to any Spaceland child that the sphere, ascending in the three positions indicated there, must needs have manifested himself to me or to any Flatlander as a circle, at first of full size, then small, at last very small indeed, approaching to a point. But to me, although I saw the facts before me, the causes were as dark as ever. All that I could comprehend was that the circle had made himself smaller and vanished, and that he had now reappeared and was rapidly making himself larger. When he regained his original size, he heaved a deep sigh, for he perceived by my silence that I had altogether failed to comprehend him. And indeed, it was now inclining to the and indeed, I was now inclining to the belief that he must be no circle at all, but some extremely clever juggler, or else that the old wives' tales was true, and after all, there were such people as enchanters and magicians. There must be magic in the world. There must be. The Avatar controls fire, air, water, and earth. After a long pause, he muttered to himself, "One resource alone remains. If I am to resort to action, I must try the method of analogy." Then he followed a still longer silence, after which he continued our dialogue. Sphere. "Tell me, Mr. Mathematician, if a point moves northward and leaves a luminous wake, what name would you give to the wake?" I. A straight line. Sphere. "And a straight line has how many extremities?" I. Two. Sphere. Now conceive the northward straight line moving parallel to itself, east and west, so that every point in it leaves behind it the wake of the straight line. What name will you give to the figure thereby formed? We will suppose that it moves through a distance equal to the original straight line. What name, I say? I. A square. And how many sides has the square? How many angles? I. Four sides and four angles. Here. Now stretch your imagination a little and conceive a square in Flatland moving parallel to itself upward. What? Northward? No, not northward. Upward, out of Flatland altogether. If it moved northward, the southern points of the square would have to move through the positions previously occupied by the northern points. That is not my meaning. I mean that every point in you, for you are a square and will serve the purpose of my illustration, every point in you, that is to say, in what you call your inside, is to pass upwards through space in such a way that no point shall pass through the position previously occupied by another point, but each point shall describe a straight line of its own. It is in this accordance which with analogy, surely it must be clear to you. So he's up. They're not going to cross any of these other points. He's talking about moving this way. And it's just so wild. There's just no way that A square will be able to understand this. He needs some sort of visual example of these things, right? Restraining my impertinence, for I was now under a strong temptation to rush blindly at my visitor and to precipitate him into space or out of Flatland anywhere so that I could get rid of him. I replied, "He's just getting tired of this. He's just like, you crazy, crazy fool. How can you come here and say these things to me? And what may be the nature of the figure which I am to shape out by this motion, which you are pleased to denote by the word upward? I presume it is describable in the language of Flatland." Sphere. "Oh, certainly. It is all plain and simple in a strict accordance with analogy. Only, by the way, you must not speak of the result as being a figure, but as a solid. But I will describe it to you, or rather not I, but analogy. We will begin with our single point, which of course, being itself a point, only has one terminal point. One point produces a line with two terminal points. One line produces a square with four terminal points. Now you can give yourself the answer to your own question. 1, 2, 4 are evidently in geometrical progression. What is the next number? 8. Sphere. Exactly. The one square produces is something which you do not as yet know a name for, but which we call a cube, with 8 terminal points. Now, are you convinced? And as this creature and has this creature sides as well as angles, or what do you call terminal points? Of course, and according to analogy, but by the way, not what you call sides, but what we call sides, you would call them solids. And how many solids or sides will appertain to this being who I am to generate by the motion of my inside in an upward direction, and whom you call a cube? So he's starting to grasp it. He's starting to like wrap his brain like around little by little. The motion upward called a cube with solid sides around. Fear, how can you ask, and you, a mathematician? The side of anything is always, if I may say so, one dimension behind the thing. Consequently, as there is no dimension behind a point has 0 sides. A line, if I may say, has 2 sides. For the points of a line may be called, by courtesy, its sides. A square has 4 sides, 0, 2, 4. What progression do you call that? Arithmetical. And what is the next number? 6. Exactly. Then you see you have answered your own question. The cube which you will generate will be bounded by 6 sides, that is to say, 6 of your insides. You see it all now, eh? Monster, I shrieked, but thou juggler, be thou juggler, enchanter, dreamer, devil, nor more will I endure thy mockeries. Either thou or I must perish. And saying those words, I precipitated myself upon him. The heresies, the disgusting lies and evils coming out of this stranger's mouth. It's so funny. It's so funny. He's getting an education, but he needs a little bit of exposure first, you know? Remember, this is a parody. This is satire, remember? The introduction told us this is satire on the real world, too. How the sphere, having in vain tried words, resorted to deeds. Chapter 17. Resorted to deeds, chat. So good, so good. We're pretty close to the end here. We're at page 80 or so of 100. We got about 20 more pages to go. We're doing good. We're doing good on this one, chat. Okay, let's think to the future though. I've been suggested to